In this week's show, we'll be talking about the appointment of Sir Kevan Collins as the Recovery Tsar.
We'll be asking, what are our children exactly recovering from?
Not only that, Martin, we'll be asking, what's it costing them in terms of cold hard cash?
And how does this work with the usual, the inevitable Ofqual emergency assessment guidelines, or they're even asking questions of us?
And really, the question we should be asking: should we scrap GCSEs altogether?
But then how will we get into the University of Woke?
You can cry and cry until your eyes are red. You can toss and tumble on a sleepless bed, but you're wasting your time.
Hello.
Martin.
Time you're wasting.
Yeah, welcome to with the finger pointing thing. It's thank you for coming and wasting some time with us after a week's or slightly awkward segue when we didn't bother putting out an issue, Martin, and it's your fault.
We're now in series 2, and instead of episode 4, you're now watching episode 3.
I don't know whether you can cope with that kind of inconsistency, but if you can't, maybe what you need is some sort of recovery curriculum.
You need some recovery curriculum by the sound of it.
Oh, good. I'm having some recovery curriculum. Yeah, so we found out this week that Sir Kevan Collins, formerly chief exec of the Education Endowment Foundation, has been appointed the Tsar for children recovering from COVID. What do we think of that, Martin?
Well, first of all, do we think he's a good appointment?
Well, he used to be a teacher.
That's a quick flash there of a teacher, indeed, if you see what I mean. But yeah, it's good
when he used to be a teacher. Yeah, in the Sun. Well, I don't know. I mean, he was, what was he? What is his? So he went from being a teacher to being, I think, was he head of children's services at Tower Hamlet, something like that, and then after some perambulations he ran the EEF, which, as you probably know, is independent. It's funded by the government, and it's meant to give advice to schools about how to spend, amongst other things, the pupil premium budget in the wisest possible way. So they've got the toolkit there, and they fund all sorts of trials in schools to find out what works.
Yeah, evidence informed, isn't it?
Oh, it's what sort of a bit, maybe hard to say. At the moment, since Kevin's left, it's all been about symbolic violence, hasn't it?
I couldn't possibly comment because I haven't looked at the website for about a year, I don't think, actually, to see what they're doing. I remember it was always about months of learning that you could add.
Yeah, no, that's all still there. And I think, that Sir Kevan left in, I think, 2019. I think he retired, and he's been, obviously enjoying himself at his own home, sensibly, staying safe. And Boris Johnson's appointed him to make sure that children catch up.
Yeah. So is it just about catch up, though? This is the big question, I think. Is it because the recovery is being talked about in different ways by different?
Yeah, it is. And I get the sense from the limited information that we've got that Sir Kevan's appointment, children catching up academically and sort of somehow making up for lost learning. That's the phrase that's being bandied about, which of course is important. But as you say, different people have different conceptualizations of what recovery might mean.
Yeah. So what do we perhaps want to catch up on? I mean, obviously there's going to be the inevitable catch up with your GCSEs, your AS and your A levels and your BTECs and your IBs, whatever you happen to be doing. There's going to be the inevitable catch up with those, which I suppose secondary schools is the big issue, perhaps.
It absolutely is, and we'll talk in a moment about the plans for Year 11. But I think lots and lots of school leaders and people that are working in secondary schools at the moment are worrying about, particularly Year 10. What's going to happen with them? What's the plan? We don't know anything. It seems highly probable that they will sit some form of exam. I would be prepared to bet a sum of money, undisclosed sum of money, that exam will be in some way foreshortened as the current Year 11's exam was intended to be.
Well, then what's the point of catching up? I mean, it's the idea of catch up that you actually get the amount of knowledge you would have had.
Yes, so of course there's that, but that's Year 10. But then we've got every other academic year right down to the early years, and they have the idea is, the belief is, and it seems reasonable to believe that they have lost some of what they would have learned had they been in school, and probably, almost certainly, perhaps the most disadvantaged students will have suffered most. That they will have found it harder because of the fact that they won't have had the enough devices at home, won't have had the same parental support perhaps with home learning to keep on top of what's going on. So they'll be more disadvantaged as a result of the pandemic.
This opens up an interesting debate, isn't it? Because I just reading, some people were saying that people who are disadvantaged should retake the year. And of course, that's sort of bear in mind that if you've got, how would you judge who is disadvantaged or not? Perhaps it's the inevitable free school meals, and that makes it easy to judge. But lots of people have had different experiences. Some have had COVID 3 or 4, having to go home with 3 or 4 times whilst they were at school, and other people don't. The internet isn't very good where they are. So who would be the ones who are chosen to redo the year? So, and also it's a bit like changing from driving on the left to driving on the right, but just doing it with a certain male drivers on one day and female drivers on the next day. It will cause chaos.
Well, it probably will. I don't think.
Arguing, why not everyone redo the whole year again? The whole school system, university system, everything. Start again.
Well, one good reason for that is what would happen to the children that would be due to start school next year, where there would be no classes for them to go into. I think
in the end, they can stay at Shore Start or nursery school and everything else. And when you get down to it, the ones who really matter are the ones who are currently in the womb.
Maybe so. I mean, I don't know if we're being entirely serious here, Martin, but I think. I don't know. Do you remember when your daughter was in nursery school and then went to primary school, and what a relief that was financially that you weren't paying nursery bills?
No, I don't think we paid nursery bills.
Do you not? Well,
we were in a short area.
Okay.
We had.
I wasn't. I'm in leafy suburbia, so that didn't apply to me.
But what happened? I mean, it was the reception year, wasn't it? The first year.
Yeah.
So you could extend reception.
Could you?
A year. I mean, that could be perhaps where the slack
is. Where would
you
get the extra reception teachers to do that?
You need staffing to do it.
Yeah. So where would they come from? Have we got lots and lots of reception teachers that are out there?
There's a dads and mums army of people who are willing to go back to out of retirement. Perhaps Kevan Collins could be one of them.
Yeah, I think actually most parents' experience of home learning has been so positive that they probably would volunteer
to do more.
Yeah, no doubt. No, I'm the sense I get is that's not likely, Martin. I think so. It seems. For instance, I take my youngest daughter who's in Year 11, and I was chatting to her the other day about were she given the chance to repeat Year 11, and she was like, absolutely not. The sooner I get out of this year and the sooner I get onto A-levels, the better. I don't want to have to repeat anything. Now, I'm not suggesting that she's necessarily representative of anybody else or typical, but I do think that's You know, when I think back to my own childhood, the idea of repeating a school year was pretty awful.
School years. I mean, this is the point of catch up. I mean, they're saying that perhaps, and again, these are all being floated in the press every now and then to see how they float, shall we say? Perhaps
they're definitely floaters.
They're floating. Perhaps you'd stay through school through the summer, through the Easter break, through half terms, through weekends.
Like a punishment, doesn't it? Feels like a punishment. And then this leads us on to that other conceptualization of what we're talking about with the recovery curriculum. Are we having to help children recover their mental stability in some way? Not only have they perhaps suffered with the shock of family members having suffered with COVID, and maybe themselves suffered with COVID, but also the blow to their mental health that they might have experienced. And so, what are they in fact recovering from? Is it lost learning that they're recovering, or are they recovering a sense of what it is to be a young person trying to live a normal life?
And a few schools are talking about having a first half term when kids get back on recovery curriculum. Which is perhaps not based on formal curriculum, but is more about well-being and other things. I've got a bit of sympathy with this, but perhaps not in that way.
Yeah, and I think, it's not like I've got no sympathy at all for that, but then the other argument is that the most disadvantaged children are the ones that would be most disadvantaged by having yet another few months of school wasted by not focusing on their academic education.
Yeah, I think that school should be as normal as possible, if you like, during lessons. I think that's important, because in itself that helps recovery. Doing things, being active, thinking not of yourself too much, but thinking about things you're studying. But my idea is just a festival of fun. Have more things going on, so you have youth clubs open, skate parks open, all this sort of thing as soon as possible, COVID permitting, but also after school activities going on, that these things are there for people to do, and there is investment put into that. So it's not just staff providing these things, it might be the numbers of unemployed actors at the moment, doing drama classes, dance classes, all these sorts of things that could work.
Athletic coaching, music, peripatetic music teaching.
And rather than being, it's driven by sort of your well-being surveys and things like this, and oh my God, we need to, not catastrophizing the whole thing, but trying to make more normal, more fun.
Yeah, no, because there's no doubt there's absolutely no doubt that some children have experienced a horrible lockdown, and their experience of not being at school will have been grim. I think that informally, lots and lots of children can't wait to get back to school, and I think that they don't. I'm imagining here they don't want to dwell on the difficulties of lockdown. They want to get on with business as usual as quickly as possible. And a festival of fun sounds great. It sounds like the Robinson household, doesn't it, writ large? And so that seems. We're hearing that there's going to be £1 billion invested in the recovery, whatever that means. And so maybe you're suggesting, Martin, that some of that money is spent on extra curricular activities.
Yeah, that is, and trips, school trips. Obviously these are going to be severely curtailed to what they could have been, but within reason, just things that involve kids having some freer time together, rather than just be sort of doggedly going through the curriculum, which should be part of it, though.
Okay. Oh, I'm not sure what happened there. There was some sort of trumpet fanfare, which signals, Martin, that people should subscribe to the channel, I believe.
There you go. They should indeed. So please do subscribe, and you'll get interviews notifications when they come up, notifications when the show comes up, and notifications of all sorts of things that you couldn't possibly imagine.
Well, do you know what? We haven't got any interviews this week, and we don't have an official book giveaway. But Martin, believe it or not, I've got a new book out this month called Making Meaning in English, and I'm more than happy to give away a copy of my book to one of our subscribers. So maybe we could draw at the end to give away a copy for that.
I'll get snipping the.
Yeah, hello at wastingyourtime.co.uk. That might come up at the top of the screen at some stage. It might not because there we are. Well done, Samantha. Good job. We hadn't briefed her, so we're really, really pleased that she managed that. We're very, very little prepping. So we will do that draw at the end of the show, and a copy of Making Meaning in it. Oh, look, I've got a copy of it. It just so happened. Oh, isn't it beautiful, Martin? It's a gorgeous looking book.
Interesting. That's it. That's it. Where she's looking through into the book.
I know. It's magical, Oliver. Anyway.
The child who wants to be part of the book, imagining herself into the picture, into the book, into that,
You're getting it, Martin. You're getting it. And for them as does, I'm doing a bit of cross-channel promotion here. You can come along to my book launch event on the 15th of February with me and Christine Council and Claire Stoneman, and we're going to be, just celebrating the fact that the book's out. Oh, wow. Samantha, you've outdone yourself. We didn't tell her any of this was happening. She is a marvel. Anyway, back to the show. I don't know. That fanfare just prompted that. But what were we talking about, Martin? We were talking about recovery curriculum and mental health and all of that sort of stuff. And Martin, basically, Martin, you're advocating that the school system should be a little bit more like your household.
If only the household was like that. But I think lots of people's households might have been like that. But I think quite a few households have probably found it quite a fraught time, certainly at points over the past few months. And it's just to have a festival of fun. Yeah.
Yeah. What was the previous, before Rachel D'Souza's appointment, the outgoing children's czar? What was she saying about this?
Anne Longfield.
Hmm.
Yeah, she was talking mainly about the problems of mental health and I think doing things more formally. But she's very pleased, as we can see there, that Kevan Collins has got the job. But boosting children's well-being and help kids get ahead, and I think that's absolutely right. But if we, like I say, catastrophize it and make well-being something too, well, should we dare say psychologically based rather than just fun based? Go out.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? That maybe the extent to which we expect people to sort of talk about their problems just makes their problems a little bit more real. Maybe giving them something else to think about.
There was that study there about teenagers, how they more likely to become catch gloom from each other and things like that. Did you read about that?
Well, and we've known about that since Durkheim, haven't we?
There was a big thing about it recently. But one thing Longfield is saying, which I do really agree with, that each school should have a counsellor or more, depending on the size of the school, more than one perhaps. But this is certainly something which I think is helpful. And
definitely. I think on this show, we've talked before about the underfunding of CAMS and the fact that there should be more access for young people to mental health services. Absolutely. Yeah, the idea of schools, maybe funding being directed at schools in order to employ counsellors would be a really good thing.
Yeah, and lots of schools do it, and it would just be a good thing for that connection to be made more of. I know some schools have got rid of counsellors over the last few years due to cuts. So that's something that needs to be money spent on it.
Yeah, it's a tough old life making decisions on all of these sorts of things. May I say, Martin, before we move on to our next segment, you're looking very regal there with your lockdown haircut. You've gone for the flowing locks, really to be accentuated, haven't you? Very, very leonine, if I may say so.
Well, I'm looking at yours and thinking, where is it?
Yes, I've gone for the potato look. I hope you like it.
In, perhaps.
Yeah, my eldest daughter decided my hair was too long, and she took some trimmers and got rid of it. Which
could you? I take it you agreed to this.
Well, there was a bit of coercion, but event, yeah. I think if I'd had fewer whiskies, I might not have done.
The other thing that children are being sort of battered over the head with was a report by the Institute for Fiscal Studies that came out this week, saying that they're going to be £40,000 worse off over a lifetime on average. Now, number one, I don't know how you measure this sort of thing, but also, if they're all £40,000 less off, I mean, what
does it matter? No, I know, but yeah. Let's think about this seriously for a second, because if children are going to be, if we're estimating the financial benefits of education, and we're acknowledging that children have lost education, and that has been lost disproportionately, and that the probability is that children from disadvantaged backgrounds will have lost out more than children from more advantaged backgrounds, then maybe it does matter. But I mean, like you, I think I'm slightly dubious about the idea of putting a price tag on the pandemic's effects on education.
And this is obviously, I mean, like you say, with if you are a poorer child, it's money does matter. Education perhaps does matter, but I'm very dubious as to whether education is the major driver for this, or whether poverty itself is the major driver for poverty causes poverty, and rather than education is the way out of it. But perhaps,
yeah, it's slightly counterintuitive, and people don't tend to want to believe it when you tell them. But there's not any real evidence that education improves economic outcomes for countries. What tends to happen, we get the cart before the horse. When countries improve economically, they spend more on education. It's not the other way around.
So it's also not based on particularly a whole cohort finding itself uneducated, or less educated as others. It's just based on figures of people who find themselves less educated through whatever reason than others at the same time as them. So I think it's sort of
it's I think we should take it with a pinch of salt, Martin.
Maybe.
But still, that doesn't mean that there isn't something serious going on, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be really concerned about what's going on for disadvantaged pupils. So we know that this year exams are cancelled. Boris Johnson did that shock announcement that exams will be cancelled, and it's become increasingly clear that exams have been cancelled in order to be replaced with exams.
Mini exams.
Yeah, well, mini exams, really small exams that you'll need a microscope to see. And the big difference will be that these exams will be, instead of being marked by examiners, they'll be marked by teachers, which seems an absurdity. But Ofqual have put out some proposals for what this should all look like, and I don't know if viewers will have looked at the DFE proposals, and the thing I would certainly recommend that you do look at them. There are quite a number of them, and it's clear when you read through these proposals that anything that's not being proposed is unlikely to happen. That's the first thing. But so one of the proposals is that students will have mini exams, some sort of exams light, and it's also proposed that whatever those assessments are, that they are similar in format to what students would have been prepared for under normal circumstances. So that's looking very likely. But there are some quite interesting things in there. So, for instance, Martin, what about homeschool children? What do we do with those? Because if you're homeschooled and you've recently had some homeschooling, then it wouldn't really be fair or reasonable to say that you'd been disadvantaged. It's very much what you signed up for. And so one of the proposals that I find quite interesting is that maybe children that have been homeschooled should be allowed to sit a normal exam. And then this opens up the idea of, should all children, if they want it, all year 11 students, should they be allowed to sit a normal exam? One of the other bits that is interesting is what the consultation asks for feedback on when schools should give results or decide the grades that centres think they should have. And one idea that I think, I'm going out on a limb here, Martin, so feel free to criticise, that I think sounds quite good, is that what if schools told students in May what grade they were going to get? We think this is the grade you're going to get. This is what we're going to be sending off to Ofqual. And then students were given the choice to either take that grade or sit an exam. What do you think about that as an idea?
Right. Sounds lovely at first, doesn't it? But those who have, of course, think they're going to get a 9, they're going to sit on their laurels quite happily. Those who've been told they're getting a 3 might, oh my God, I've got to go for it. And try and get their grades up. How's this going to work if all those who've sitting on the laurels at the higher end, perhaps, and all those at the lower end are working hard and manage to get their grades up? Isn't this sort of inflationary?
Well, I think there's an acknowledgement that whatever happens this year is going to be inflationary. The fact that we've decided to get rid of exams but stick with grades ensures a second year of grade inflation. So there's no getting away from that. And in fact, the DfE and Ofqual have kind of made clear that schools should be erring on the side of generosity. We know there's going to be no repeat of the algorithm which led to the all the crying students and scenes of devastation and the debacle that was particularly A-level results day last year. There will be no repeat of that. And it would seem clear that there's a determination, a hope for schools to the results well in advance of those results being given to students, and so that there's an appeals process that will be followed, and there'll be plenty of time to do that, so that students' onward trajectory into employment or university shouldn't, fingers crossed, be too greatly affected by what's proposed.
But there's the other side to this, of course, which is all this focus on the actual grade is sort of distracting us from one thing that's perhaps more important, and that is what has been actually learnt.
Yeah, well, quite, and as you'll know, Martin, various people have taken this as an opportunity to raise the question that maybe let's get rid of the GCSE altogether.
Indeed. Should we scrap GCSEs? Well, this is an idea that's got into the Sunday Times last week, and it's 2 new schools, one from the man behind the phrase bog standard comprehensive, the other from a group of private schools that educates Prince George, are to challenge the belief that teenagers should sit exams. This is Tony Blair's Downing Street aide, who it's, I think, part-time speechwriter as well. That was Peter Hyman, who's of School 21 fame, and Ben and Tobin Thomas brothers, who own Thomas's Battersea, where George and sister Princess Charlotte are pupils. Now, I'm sure those two probably don't need any GCSEs in terms of their future.
Do you think they'll be okay?
But perhaps they do for the knowledge. But, is the knowledge that GCSEs give you important? Or are there other things that people need instead? And I think that's one of the things that the Thomases are arguing for. They want to develop an online passport to record teenagers' kindness and creativity, social and communication skills, teamwork, as well as academic progress.
I think didn't you interviewed a while back somebody from Didau's,
Yes.
and they've replaced GCSEs, haven't they?
Yeah, and like I say, perhaps in certain schools, like Didau's, and perhaps other schools of slightly well-to-do folks might send their children to. Perhaps GCSEs have less cachet, less necessary. But, you know, if you're in downtown, well, I was going to say Peckham, but Peckham's becoming posh now. But wherever you happen to be, you need your GCSEs to get a job, governor. You know what I mean? That's what employers understand.
Well, at least they think they do. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So if we're gonna get rid of GCSEs, we need some kind of standard that everybody recognises means something. I have to say, Martin, one of the wonderful ironies is one of the voices behind getting rid of GCSEs is former Education Secretary Kenneth Baker, the man responsible for the GCSE all those years ago. I was in the very first year group to sit GCSEs. I went into school expecting to do CSEs or O levels and ended up doing GCSEs. And I hold him responsible for everything that has happened since. And so he's now come out against the GCSE as well.
Yeah, he's saying that these exams measure the wrong things, stifle children's creativity and hinder youngsters from finding their talents. This is a group rethinking assessments come together to talk about England's mutant exam system. I think to some extent, if Kenneth Baker, it's like the kid with the ball, you know, wants to go home now and take his ball with him. He's entitled to say that GCSEs are no longer of any use. And to some extent, I do think there are huge problems in our exam system. To me, perhaps it's because now kids are meant to be educated up to 18, that perhaps we specialize a bit too early in this country, that A levels are actually the big problem, and the cut between A levels and apprenticeships, etc. This, you know, the 11 plus is now a 16 plus, where we tend to sort of put people into different boxes, far too specialized, far too early, perhaps.
Yeah, no, I think that's all true, and I've got no problem reforming GCSEs. I've got no problem with scrapping GCSEs and replacing them with something else. But what are we going to replace them with? And I think that as you made clear, the plan is some sort of online portfolio. And the big problem with replacements for exams, not GCSEs for exams, is I think most people would agree that exams are terrible. There are all sorts of terrible problems with exams, that nobody enjoys them. They're a horrible way to end your time in education, but every other alternative which seems to be pitted against them appears to be worse than exams.
Yeah, and they're talking about this portfolio being a web portfolio as well, of course, that you can click to and see. I don't know what you would see there. And of course, again, is this helpful? I mean, just to sort of someone going for a job, you can look now and say, oh, you got so many GCSEs, blah, 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 blah. The number means this in your head, so that's what counts. Or go through a portfolio.
Now, yeah, and look at their essays that they've written. You've
got to trawl through that.
Can you imagine how
hours, isn't it? So
it's bad enough for teachers having to read kids' work. Can you imagine employers having to do that?
Yeah, in the end, they're just going to say, "Well, let's put numbers next to these things." So
genuinely, and I mean this genuinely, I think exams and grades are the worst possible option apart from all the other ones.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think they would take away exams entirely. I think there's a need for some exams, but whether what they're suggesting is going to help, I don't know. But
well, it might help the
is this the time I think they're trying to take advantage of the fact that the GCSEs are obviously undergoing some stresses at the moment. So perhaps
They are. They are. No doubt about that. There's no doubt about that. And I think one of the interesting things is that we're in a position this year where where students can't sit exams, and we really haven't been able to come up with anything better, which is why the government's replacing them with exams.
But the other thing is, isn't it? The point. Oh, you're back.
Phew.
The other thing is, of course, with the exams is sorry, I completely lost the thread. Hold on. you disappearing into a question mark. Let's take 2 on that. What was the last point you said? Do you remember?
No. Anyway, look, Martin, here's the thing. If we replace exams and grades and all the rest of it, they're very, very useful for, amongst other people, for admission tutors at university. They want to look at exams to know whether they should accept people in. I remember, actually, our subscribers might remember this. We did an interview with Sam Friedman last month or so, where he talked about, and I found this very interesting, that in many other countries, universities don't rely on grades in quite the same way. And he's talking about the Canadian university system, where pretty much you apply to university and pretty much everyone goes, regardless of their performance. But in this country, it's an important and sacred right to make sure that every year some people are disappointed and can't go to the university of their choice. And who would want to forego that opportunity?
I think that's an issue, though, isn't it? Because the idea of the system is to create sheep and goats, to let some people go there and some people to fail, and to therefore be stuck with a life of toil instead of, the ivory towers. And this sort of extraordinary jump between the two is something which schools end up with. You end up with some kids who are deemed to have failed school.
Yeah.
And the system works in that way. There is nothing that can take that away. What do you do? And that's the end of 13 years of, well.
Yeah, no, I think that's indefensible, Martin. I completely agree. And on that, as I say, I'm not at all happy with grades. I think they are bad. And it's something I thought quite a bit about. It's just that the human tendency to want to be able to categorize and rank people is such that whatever we do within the system, people will find a way to say that person's better than that person. And
but it's not just that. It's fine grading, isn't it?
No, absolutely.
Well, there's degrees of failure, degrees of success.
Absolutely. I would be, ideologically, I'd be quite happy to get rid of grades and just have a driving test like solution where we're saying either competent or incompetent to take part in society. But again, what do you do with the people that we're judging to be incompetent?
The other thing is there's a certain degree of pretense about the accuracy of marking. That there's been a lot of surveys on that, particularly as you go into the arts and the humanities, English and places like that. Even though in maths and science, surprisingly, there is a quite a wide degree of chances of getting different grades with the same paper, depending on who's marking it, depending on when it was done, etc., etc. It's a 9 isn't always accurately better than an 8. It's not.
No, it's not. No, it's not. And obviously they're very, very cliff edge. So like 1 mark either way could mean a different grade. So we have this idea of, spuriousness there, but also the fact that the reliability of essay-based subjects like English and history and that sort of thing are around about 0.7, which basically means in layman's terms that in 30% of cases a different examiner would have given a different grade, and we kind of accept that as baked into the system as is, which is problematic, and we know that, and we accept these problems. But the real difficulty is, Martin, that the people who are against exams have not yet come up with anything which is persuasively better.
Except you say, and I mean, there are few countries now that grade in such a way as we do at the GCSE sort of level at that 16. So there are fewer countries doing that. So there are other countries who are trying to do
Yeah. Well, I mean, so for instance, you take American universities. Obviously, what happens in school there is you get a GPA, and that's entirely arbitrary almost, and sort of really open to bias. And then students sit SATs or ACTs in order to access further education, and that is open to huge accusations of bias also. And it's a very different system to what we do here in the UK. And I don't necessarily think that advocates for getting rid of GCSEs think that's a better bet.
Yeah, I mean, and bias is an interesting one, because some people, of course, think bias is not necessarily all about assessment, but is also about curriculum content.
Well, and that leads us, doesn't it? Is a rather, well, I don't know how neat or clunky it is, but it takes us to our final item in tonight's show, which is about what's going on at Leicester University, Martin.
Yeah, we've got we've got a Daily Mail report, haven't we, about the University of Woke. Welcome to the University of Woke, and this is about a change to the offer of proposed change, I believe, change the offer at University of Leicester, which I think was medieval studies and something else, but Chaucer and various things like that. That apparently kids are no longer finding their way to. They're not wanting to go to Leicester to study Chaucer, as far as I can see. And so therefore they're thinking about moving on those courses, retiring them perhaps to a field outside of Leicester, and replacing them with more up to date, I think the words were, subjects and subjects that children might find interesting, including studies around race and gender, etc., etc., etc.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's an interesting one, isn't it? That Leicester University has arguably been falling in the rankings. And it's also losing student numbers. So there's probably all sorts of internal pressures, internal and external pressures, over at Leicester University to try and do something about that. It can't really be sustainable. But they do have, actually, as it turns out, a really quite respectable medieval literature department there. That they run a good course by all accounts, and the proposal is that they junk that in favour, as you say, of something a little bit more modish, shall we say. And predictably, perhaps this has got the usual suspects up in arms. You mentioned there, that's a Daily Mail article, but this has been widely reported across the press. It's not just the Daily Mail putting the boot in. But what is this a legitimate attempt, Martin, to decolonise the curriculum? Is getting rid of, Anglo-Saxon literature and medieval literature, is that genuinely decolonising the curriculum?
Well, it's difficult because it's a university, and you're talking about removing one course and bringing in another course. In the general way of things, that wouldn't necessarily cause much hoo-ha, I wouldn't have thought, because courses come and courses go.
Well, yes, and that's I guess all of those medievalists that they currently employ can retrain as gender studies professors, can't they? So that's not a big deal for them.
Do you remember when this happens in schools sometimes? Of course, we had a classics teacher at our school when classics disappeared off the curriculum, as it wont to do at various.
Ended up teaching PE.
She became an English teacher. That's as woke as it gets, isn't it?
Yeah,
going
pretty much
to English, but the modern language, of English. But I don't know. I think it's a storm in the teacup, really. And I think it's the way it's been reported that is more perhaps the issue here.
Yeah.
about trying to.
It's become part of the culture wars, hasn't it, Martin? It's become part of the culture wars.
Yeah, and I think it's how it's been reported that's probably drumming up more. I don't think they've gone through the curriculum and said, let's get rid of that because we need this in necessarily. They are trying to look at making commercial decisions because
Well,
business, they've got
yeah.
customers.
I think part of those, I mean, it's similar perhaps to the kind of decision making that's happened in charter schools in the US, which we were talking about in one of our previous shows, perhaps being a little bit more woke, to use the word, in that they were jettisoning some of the things that had become associated with the charter school network in order to accommodate some ideas which are maybe more popular, because the bottom line is, whether you're a charter school operator or you're running a university, bums on seats are important.
Yeah, and particularly these days, because that's how you get your money, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
No, you're not going to get paid.
This is a financial decision. Absolutely.
This is a sort of, this is the, if you make universities into a business, which is kind of what the Conservative Party has done,
Yeah.
then you've got to go with what young people want. You know, they are customers. It's not about the subject anymore. It's not about teaching the best that's been thought and said or anything like that. That's jettisoned. It's what the customer wants.
It's a beauty contest.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe that's where we should place our ire. I mean, you're absolutely right to say it's the way it's been reported. And the reason, my mum got in touch with me having read a Daily Mail article saying, "Oh, have you heard Leicester University is getting rid of English?" And I said, well, it's not quite that bad. But, it triggers people. It's a dog whistle. People hear what they want to hear. And so in our febrile times where we've drawn these battle lines, it plays well and with a certain sort of headline for sure. Yeah.
Hey. If you're interested in all the culture wars and education arguments, we've got tons of stuff on our YouTube channel. Interviews with luminaries from all sides of the argument. So please dig in there. And
recently, we've had you interviewed Benny Kara talking about, and we've also had interviews with Catherine Birbal Singh and Andrew Doyle, Toby Young, all of these people, which are available on the channel. Please go and have a look. You'll find much there to infuriate and enlighten you.
This is what we intend to do: infuriate and enlighten.
So, Martin, before we go, would you do the honours and draw the winner of my new book, Making Meaning in English?
We should talk about your book perhaps next week.
Yeah. You said that about the last one, but it never happened.
No, I've actually read this one.
Have you?
Matt Swain.
Matt Swain, if you email us at hello@wastingyourtime.co.uk and give us your address, I will send you a copy of the book. And everyone else, please come along to the book launch, which was just flashed up on your screens there on the 15th of February. And all sorts of fun times to be had, including book giveaways and competitions and larks. Anyway, Martin, I think that's probably enough for everyone for another week, isn't it?
I think so.
So thank you very much for wasting your time with me, David Didau.
And me, Ronnie Barker.
Brilliant. Bye-bye.
You can cry and cry until your eyes are red.